by Fire Chief Schmaltz. Do you need any more introduction than that?
No, I think that's a perfect
Fire
introduction.
Chief Schmaltz, come on up.
All right, thank you. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners, it is with great pleasure that I have the opportunity to present to you tonight a recap of the Fire Department's activities for 2016. This past year was filled with numerous department accomplishments, personal achievements, and challenges that no one could have predicted. In 2016, we were confronted with a multitude of situations that could have easily crippled an organization. We had to use our reserve apparatus on a consistent basis. The stations were always in need of repair, and because of injuries, we were never able to be at full staff. As a department, we could have easily blamed others and made excuses as to why we couldn't be effective. That would have been the easy way out. Instead, we embraced the challenges and chaos, we took them head on, and in the end, we are stronger and better for it. Okay, so you see, despite everything that went on over the past year, we were still able to complete close to 12,000 hours of training. This is roughly 106 hours per person per year. We completed 3 days of live burn training in Kalamazoo again, which helps with our ISO rating. We participated in both White Men and Allies labs. We had multiple members of our hazmat team attend classes all over the country that are hosted by the federal government. They not only received certificates, but more importantly, they had the opportunity to work side by side with experts who specialize in topics like radiological emergencies, railcar derailments, and weapons of mass destruction, just to name a few. The department continued to actively pursue grants in 2016. We received a $1,500 grant from Enbridge that we used to buy hazmat equipment for the team. We've also submitted for the annual AFG grants, and the Fire Marshal actively seeks out opportunities to get smoke detectors donated, and he was instrumental in working with the Exchange Club, who donated over $36,000 that was used to purchase thermal imaging cameras, swift water rescue equipment, smoke detectors, and other fire prevention materials. The department also experienced some personal achievements. Battalion Chiefs Adam Majors and Mike Fleischer both completed the Staff Command program at Eastern Michigan University. BC Majors missed being the top academic student by less than half a point. With their completion of the program, all 4 battalion chiefs hold the distinction of being Staff and Command graduates. Battalion Chief Erskine completed the 9-month program to become a certified community coach and was appointed to the Michigan Firefighters Training Council Curriculum Committee. Battalion Chief Matt Beauchamp was accepted to the National Fire Academy's Executive Fire Officer program. This is one of the premier programs in the country for the fire service. It is a 4-year journey that requires a student to spend 2 weeks a year for 4 years at the National Fire Academy in Emmitsburg, Maryland. Once each class is completed, the student has 6 months to write an advanced research project tailored to the issues that his or her department faces. To even apply to the program, it requires a minimum of a bachelor's degree, and is considered master degree level work. To be admitted into the program is a great honor, considering that they get close to 1,000 applicants a year and only accept approximately 300 students. Fire Marshal Jones was made a member of the Community Risk Reduction Committee, which is part of the State Fire Marshal's Office. And lastly, Lieutenant Michelle Huey is graduating from Siena Heights University with a bachelor's degree in public safety and with a minor in public service administration. So what I'd like to jump forward to, maybe, there we go. I know it's a little hard to read, so hopefully everyone received this in their packet. Wanted to go over some statistics and then basically how our department is made up. I get a lot of questions of, who's at what stations, how many firefighters are stationed there. So our org chart is listed here. We have 82 sworn members, and that includes the administrative staff and 1 civilian, which is Julie Pena, our secretary. So the shift battalions, they handle everything on the left, and then the administrative battalion chief is over the training officer and the fire marshal. If you turn to the next page, and again for the audience, I'm sorry for being a little small. Wanted to hit some highlights here. Our total calls for service has increased from in the last 3 years from 6,500 roughly to 7,200. In the response mode, I've highlighted the number 433. So our average response time is 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And the reason that's important is twofold. One, NFPA 1710 for professional fire department staffing requires that we meet a 4-minute response time 90% of the time for our first in vehicles. We do a pretty good job, but I think what actually throws us off is our response out to the fort. It's very easily we have an 8 to 9 minute response at a minimum, and I think that's what's pushing our average up higher than what I truly believe it is. So that's why I've highlighted the 4 minutes and 33 seconds there. The next chart, I get these questions a lot, calls by the day of the week, time of day. So I just wanted to share that information with you. There was nothing that really jumped out at me when I was analyzing data, other than the fact we've had a significant increase on Fridays and Saturdays. Kind of hard to tell why that would be. I don't know that answer, but I found it to be somewhat interesting. And the same with the calls at the time of the day. If you look at the graph, which was pretty telltale, is how it kind of goes down low in a couple hours during the day, but then it spikes up, which was surprising to me, right around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. That wasn't something that I expected to see. I would have thought it would have been almost flip-flopped and reversed. Now, what some people will want to do with some of this data is to try to base it on staffing levels, and I just don't think you can do that with the data. To me, there's not a big enough gap to say that between the hours of, let's say, midnight and 6 that we can reduce staffing. I just don't believe that, particularly, again, when it's the type of calls that we do run on. So our next graph, I broke it out to calls per station. Particularly within the organization, it becomes somewhat of a little bit of a competition on, who's busier, who's not busier. So this is pretty good data. Again, the graph shows that station number 2 is by far our busiest, with station number 4 following up behind. And it seems to be, over a 3-year period, to be pretty steady. Now, what you do see is station number 3, there is a decrease in calls. But that's due to the fact that Station 1, when we were having it open, did kind of take up some of that burden. So I certainly expect next year for Station 3 to jump up in overall call total. So then that takes us to the next slide, which talks about our incidents. And I've highlighted again a couple of those. And under the fire is I highlighted 74. And the reason I did that is because that's, as you'll see in the next slide down below, that's a significant increase in overall fires. And then, as expected, the trend throughout the country is for our EMS to continue to rise, and we rise by 247 calls. But overall, we only increased by 110 calls from last year to this year. But the structure fires, so I broke that out into regular structure fires and cooking fires. So if you look at the graph here, we had an 87% increase in structure fires from 2015 to 2016, which is an incredible jump. Not to mention that the jump really shows up in Station 2's area. So what you try to do with that data is, A, try to drill down and find out why the increase, and then more particularly why the increase in that area. So we're going to go back, we're going to dig through the reports, we're going to try to figure out exactly why that took place so we can start to build programs around that to try to reduce that, because the best way to fight a fire is to prevent it from the start. So on the next slide then, I broke out cooking fires, and again, a 27% increase, which to me is very significant. We should be able to reduce that, but I think, again, it's going to take some effort on all of our parts to get that information out. A little plug here, for example, one of the things that we teach is that when you're cooking, it's very easy to walk away from the stove. So we ask people take the spoon or your cooking utensil with you when you walk away so that you don't get distracted, so that you always have that in your hand, remind you that you've got food on the stove so it doesn't get out of control. So there's a little plug there. And then I also wanted to see actually what we were doing EMS-wise and which were the busier stations. And surprisingly, I would expect 2 and 4 to still be the same, but we saw the biggest jump, I think, over at station number 6 on the south side of town. They had a huge increase in total calls, but it was more in the EMS world than the fire side of things. The pie chart here, I put that up there just to give you kind of an idea of the difference between percentages of us running fire and EMS calls. And fire responses were a little up when it comes to the national average. It's usually about 80-20, and we're running about 75% on the EMS side, and about 25% on the fire side. So we're a little higher than what the national average is. And then I kind of saved the last graph, graph for last. It's the one that makes me the most proud. Out of all the fires, the property that was involved was about $15 million, and we were able to save close to $14 million of that. So I think that just shows the expertise, the professionalism, and the ability that our people can do the job when it comes to actually responding to the emergencies. Man, that's terrible. So that takes us kind of to the Inspection Prevention Division, which is Quincy Jones, our fire marshal. He did pretty well on inspections. He was a little low, but the part that I really wanted to highlight was the smoke detectors that we handed out. This year we handed out over 1,000 smoke detectors, and that couldn't have been done without the tenacity of Fire Marshal Jones to try to acquire extra funds to go to the organizations to get those detectors for free. Because again, if we don't have them, we end up paying for them. And then we did personally, our department actually went to 95 homes and installed smoke detectors. So that's what that 95 means. And then in 2015, we didn't have carbon monoxide detectors. This year in 16, they were actually handing them out to us to give out. So we actually handed out just shy of 100. So Fire Marshal Jones does an outstanding job on his own to have to handle three major areas. That's going to pretty much end the slideshow for myself. What I did include in the packets were maps, because again, most people don't know how the city's broken up into what stations. So the map that's up there right now is a map of the entire city, and the different colors represent each different station locations. And in your packet, then you'll have, for example, that's Station 1. The purple there is Station 2. The blue is 3. That will be Station 4 is the red. Green is 5 out in Urbandale, and 6 is on the south side. And then we didn't include the airport, because that pretty much, the airport's the airport. So to bring this kind of to conclusion, one more thing I really wanted to talk about this evening. It was one of the goals that we set for the organization last year, and that was to try to improve our ISO rating, the insurance service organization that sets our insurance rates for our homes and our commercial businesses. It's composed up of 3 components. You have the communications, which is central dispatch. You have the fire department, which is 50%. And then the water supply in the city, which is 40%. And then ISO comes back in and they grade us. I was expecting that to happen more in the fall of 16, and they showed up in the spring of 16, so I didn't have enough time really to get us to where I was hoping. But even with that, we did improve. We still stayed a 3, which isn't bad, but we went from 71.6 up to 76.09 in a short time from when we actually made the push to do this. I still have every intentions of wanting to move towards a 2. If we are to accomplish that, we'd be the 6th community in the state of Michigan that has that, and there's just a little over 1,000 nationwide that's at that level 2. The question is always asked, well, what's that going to do? How does that help us? Again, as I said before, it's very hard to get an insurance company to say this is exactly the changes you're going to make, but as far as a homeowner would go, you could probably expect about $50 to $75 decrease in your homeowner's insurance. It's going to be the commercial side where we're going to see the biggest benefit. Now, please don't hold this to me, but I have heard that if we were to go to a 2, we could look at probably about a 20% reduction for commercial insurance. So I think that's fantastic. So as I was combing through the report again a little bit today and trying to find the different areas where I think we need to work on, I pulled out what I thought were probably the 4. Communications was one. So we don't have necessarily a lot of control over what happens at Central Dispatch, but we have the ability to make recommendations through the governing board. And I've had some conversations with Rebecca and Chief Blocker, because one of the things that dispatch doesn't have is, I hate to say dispatch protocols, but that's what they call it. When somebody calls 911 for an EMS call, it pops up on the computer and questions are populated. All right, so that's a good thing. The only thing is it doesn't do anything for the ISO grading scale, but they do have the program for fire and police. So what I have asked Chief Blocker to do when he goes to the governing board is to try to ask about us as a county trying to make purchase of that program, because not only would it help the city of Battle Creek, but all fire departments in the county. And I've been asking that question at TAC. So hopefully that'll start to move forward. Pre-fire planning inspections. We kind of got, I hate to say it, we kind of got hammered on that. We have not done a very good job in making those happen. So that's going to be one of our next priorities, is to try to get somebody that can handle the pre-fire inspections and to get those points, because we didn't get any score on that one. And then inspection and flow testing. The water department, because we only test hydrants, the way the reports reads, about every 5 years, we didn't get full credit. So if we can get us testing and flow testing the hydrants more often on a regular basis, we'll get some more of those points. And then the last thing was the facilities. And the facilities aren't fire stations necessarily, it's for training. And that's why, as I talked about earlier in the report, that we went over to Kalamazoo to do the live fire training. To get full credit, we need 18 hours at a facility like that per employee for the year. So it's a little hard for us to take over there and get all that time in. So we're able to catch some points there where we weren't in the past. So again, the hope is that as we move forward down the next couple of years, we're able to improve our training ground, make it to the size what they're looking for. So that's probably going to be one of my top priorities this year going into 17, is to try to really tackle more of this ISO. I think it's doable, and I'd be really excited to make that come to fruition. So with that, I know I'm running a little long, but I'd like to open it up for questions.
Thank you, Chief. Does anybody have any questions for the Chief? Yes.
I was wanting to get thank you very much for your presentation. I wanted to get a little bit more detailed, if you have it, and maybe get it to us later if not. But you were mentioning the cooking fires. I just wanted to drill down that a little bit more. Did you see a certain type of cooking fire rising to the top? I mean, was it grease, or was it, what was it exactly that seems to be the biggest issue?
The hardest thing about trying to narrow that down is the reporting system from the National Fire Incident Reporting System. They don't ask for that necessarily. So what I can do is we can try to pull some of that out of our system to see how it was coded, and then try to go back and read some of the narratives to see if the officer was able to capture exactly what was going on.
Yeah, so, I'm just thinking as far as education, that might be
absolutely
more helpful.
Yeah, it's just going to take a little bit of us diving back to the reports and collecting and drilling down, but I don't think it should be a problem as long as the information is there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Yes, Vice Mayor.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you, Chief. It was very, very informational
you're welcome.
report. I appreciate it. Two things. I would agree with you that your 4 minutes and 33 seconds of response time is being skewed. On the one, you've got to probably break this down by station, don't you?
You'd like to, but ISO doesn't do it that way. They look at the overall response time. So yeah, I would think that Station 2 and Station 3 have outstanding response times, but then you take Station 4 and 6 that covers a large area, because like Territorial and 20th is where 4 is at. And if they're running all the way out to the fort, that's a long haul. I wish I could break it out, but when it comes to ISO, they don't allow me to do that. It's the overall response time for the organization.
All right. Well, the second thing is, I also sit on that dispatch board. You probably
yes.
remember that.
Yes, I do.
So if you want to send me that information,
sure.
I didn't realize you were asking for that. And I'd be happy
okay.
to take a look at that and raise that at the board level.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, I know Mr. Flores.
I sort of answered some of my own questions. I was looking at I was going back to look at the increases in total call for service, and you had mentioned that there are some national trends around EMS. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that. I'm just wondering, if we're continuing to see an increase. I know that part of that was still under investigation of why the additional increase in fires, but trying to better understand that.
The population is getting older. People are living longer.
Sort of what I was assuming, but just
yeah,
wanting to clarify.
It's the baby boomers.
Okay.
They're starting to retire, dealing with more medical issues. And again, I don't think we're at about a 5%. I think is what I discovered on an increase, which is pretty much expected. It's not that we're seeing more of one type or another. It's just everybody's just getting older, and we're living longer.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Hilmo.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. Last time you presented, you were talking to us about some changes that you would plan to make to the testing. We just gone through, or we were about to go through a testing period and
Yes.
getting new people on the list. So I'm curious about how that went. Did you see any progress in diversifying the lists?
I think it went really well, actually. We were able to get far more people through the physical. Well, let me back up. Not necessarily. We changed the physical agility test to be more about what it's meant to be, physical, not so much about skill. And we saw a lot of people, at least I did the first time I went through, the people that probably could have done the job well, it's just they struggled with the skill component of that. So we changed it a little bit so that it was more, again, about the physical strength and the attributes if you were able to do that. So we saw more people, more diverse, able to make that through. Particularly the female firefighters, but I want to stress, it didn't make it any easier. In fact, I actually felt it made it a little bit harder because we actually introduced a sled that you have to hit, so it simulates chopping an axe, and I wish I could remember exactly the amount of weight that hits it. Another thing, and it was a small change, but I think it made all the difference in the world. Prior to this year, we used to put everybody in turnout gear and wear an air pack. All right, well, if you've ever tried to wear, a boot that's 3 sizes too big and stuff that's hanging on you, you just can't perform well. So we took that component out, and then we made everybody wear a 50-pound weight vest, which was more along the lines of what they do nationally when it's like a CPAT test, candidate physical agility test. So we tried to mirror that. And then again, once we got through that, then we had the interviews. But when you look at the list, I feel very encouraged. I feel that it's a more diversified list. Certainly not to where I would like to be, but I think myself and the battalion chiefs are a little hard on ourselves. We wanted a more down lower, per se. But overall, I think we got a very good, well-rounded group going into this next hiring process.
Good, thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone else? Yes.
I know you're still looking into the structure fires, Station 2 area. That's quite an increase from 2015. I'm wondering if a lot of that has to do with just older housing stock, or were these occupied buildings or vacant buildings? Do you have any?
I didn't actually drill down to that point for the presentation. It could be a multitude of things. It could be that. It could be that we have had, in my opinion, a tick up in some arson fires. We've been to multiple houses a couple times, so that starts in that number. And I can't overlook the part too. It's just how we code the fires. Okay, so what I mean by that is a fire officer comes back, fills out the report. Maybe in 2015, maybe they would have classified it as, like, say, a fire other or a good intent call, but this year they classified it as a structure fire, what we would call with like 111. So there is that standard deviation that you have to kind of pay attention to, but I don't think it's enough to say that it's all reporting. There was certainly an uptick, because it's not just in Station 2, it's throughout the city where we actually saw some increases. Next year is going to be a good telltale of what the trend is, I believe. But if we keep pushing forward and we try to do more prevention-wise and get that information out, if we can prevent it, that's the ultimate goal.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or anything? Okay, Chief, thank you very much. As always, very informational, and we appreciate your time and effort you put into that.
Thank you.
Thank you.